The grand corridors of Kensington Palace had witnessed centuries of royal drama, but nothing quite like what was about to unfold on this crisp autumn morning. Behind the polished marble walls and beneath the watchful eyes of painted ancestors, a web of secrets was about to unravel in the most spectacular fashion. What started as whispered conversations in shadowy alcoves would soon explode into a confrontation that would shake the very foundations of the royal household. Some secrets are too dangerous to keep, and some truths too powerful to hide. When Prince William discovered what had been happening right under his nose, his reaction would send shockwaves through the palace that would be felt for generations to come. This is the story of betrayal, loyalty, and the moment when a future king had to choose between family and duty. The morning sun cast long shadows across the manicured gardens of Kensington Palace as Prince William made his way through the East Wing corridors. He had returned earlier than expected from his charitable engagement in Manchester, the event having concluded ahead of schedule due to security concerns. His footsteps echoed against the polished floors as he headed toward his private study, his mind still processing the successful visit to the Children's Hospital. William had always prided himself on maintaining order within his household. Since taking on more responsibilities as heir to the throne, he had become increasingly meticulous about protocol and the proper functioning of the royal residences. Every staff member had their designated duties. Every visitor was carefully vetted, and every activity within the palace walls was supposed to be accounted for through proper channels. As he turned the corner toward the library wing, William noticed something unusual. The door to the restricted archives room was slightly ajar, and he could hear muffled voices coming from within. This particular room housed sensitive historical documents and was supposed to be accessible only to specific authorized personnel with prior clearance. William paused, his hand instinctively reaching for his phone to check if there had been any scheduled archival work that morning. His personal secretary, James Morrison, had provided him with a detailed schedule before his departure to Manchester, and William was certain no activities had been planned for the archives. The voices grew more distinct as he approached, and his stomach tightened as he recognized one of them. It was unmistakably Camilla's voice, speaking in hushed but urgent tones. William pressed himself against the wall beside the door, his heart beginning to race. Through the narrow gap, he could see Camilla standing near a large oak table covered with official-looking documents. Across from her stood a man William didn't immediately recognize, dressed in an expensive suit but clearly not a member of the royal household staff. The stranger was elderly, perhaps in his 70s, with silver hair and sharp features that suggested someone accustomed to wielding influence. Camilla was speaking in a tone William had never heard from her before, her usual warm demeanor replaced by something colder and more calculating. She held several documents in her hands, occasionally pointing to specific passages as she spoke to the stranger. William strained to hear their conversation, catching fragments about financial arrangements, discretionary funds, and maintaining silence. The stranger nodded repeatedly, occasionally interjecting with questions about implementation timelines and risk assessment. William watched in growing alarm as Camilla handed over what appeared to be official palace letterhead documents, along with what looked like bank statements or financial records. The exchange was clearly rehearsed and systematic, suggesting this was not their first such meeting. William's mind raced as he tried to process what he was witnessing. Camilla had access to certain administrative functions within the royal household, but nothing that would justify a clandestine meeting in the restricted archives. The presence of financial documents was particularly troubling, as all royal expenditures were supposed to go through proper accounting channels with full transparency and oversight. As the conversation continued, William heard Camilla mention specific amounts of money, figures that made his blood run cold. The numbers being discussed were substantial enough to fund entire charitable initiatives or minor palace renovations. More disturbing still was the casual manner in which she discussed these figures, as if moving such amounts was a routine matter. The stranger pulled out a leather briefcase and began organizing the documents Camilla had given him. As he did so, William caught sight of additional papers already in the case, suggesting this exchange was part of a larger operation. The efficiency of their interactions spoke to a well-established relationship and a carefully planned system of information transfer. William felt a wave of nausea as he began to understand the implications of what he was witnessing. If Camilla was involved in some form of financial impropriety or unauthorized disclosure of palace information, the scandal could devastate the royal family. The public trust that the monarchy depended upon could be irreparably damaged, and the carefully maintained image of integrity and service could crumble overnight. The conversation began to wind down, with the stranger checking his watch and mentioning something about a flight to Geneva that evening. Camilla nodded and walked him toward a side door that led to a private courtyard. a route that would allow him to leave without being seen by most of the palace staff. William realized this exit strategy had been planned in advance, another indication of the sophisticated nature of their operation. As they moved toward the door, William heard Camilla mention his name specifically, causing his heart to skip a beat. She was discussing his schedule and upcoming public appearances with alarming precision, providing details that could only come from internal palace communications. The stranger took notes as she spoke, treating the information as if it held significant value. William's hands clenched into fists as he listened to his stepmother discuss his private activities with a complete stranger. The violation of trust felt personal and profound, cutting through his professional concerns to touch something deeper. Camilla had been part of his family for years, had been present at intimate family gatherings, had shared in their joys and sorrows. To discover her engaged in what appeared to be a systematic betrayal was devastating. The sound of approaching footsteps forced William to make a quick decision. He couldn't remain hidden much longer without risk of discovery, but he also couldn't simply walk away without gathering more information about what he had witnessed. He quickly retreated to a nearby alcove and pulled out his phone, activating the recording function as quietly as possible. From his new vantage point, William could still observe the final moments of the meeting. Camilla shook hands with the stranger, and William managed to capture several clear photos of the man's face and general appearance. The stranger departed through the side door as planned, leaving Camilla alone in the archives room with the remaining documents. William watched as Camilla carefully reorganized the materials left behind, placing some items back in their original locations while securing others in what appeared to be a personal folder. Her movements were methodical and practiced, reinforcing William's growing certainty that this was not an isolated incident but part of an ongoing operation. As Camilla prepared to leave the archives room, William made his decision. He could not confront her immediately, not without more information about the scope and nature of her activities. Instead, he needed to gather evidence and understand the full extent of what was happening before taking any action. The stakes were too high for a hasty response that might drive the operation underground or alert other potential conspirators. William waited until Camilla had left the area before emerging from his hiding place. He approached the archives room carefully, checking to ensure he was truly alone before entering. The room still carried the faint scent of the stranger's cologne, and William could see slight disarray among some of the document storage areas where their meeting had taken place. He began a careful examination of the room, looking for any evidence of what documents might have been accessed or copied. Several filing cabinets showed signs of recent use, and William noted which sections appeared to have been disturbed. His heart sank as he realized the areas that had been accessed contained some of the most sensitive palace administrative records, including financial oversight documents and staff security clearances. The weight of his discovery settled heavily on William's shoulders as he stood alone in the archives room. Whatever Camilla was involved in, it had the potential to cause immense damage to the royal family and the institution of the monarchy itself. He was faced with the terrible realization that someone he had trusted implicitly had been operating against the interests of the family and the crown. As William left the archives room, his mind was already working through the implications and necessary next steps. He needed to conduct a thorough investigation before taking any action, but he also knew that time might be of critical importance. If Camilla's activities were part of a larger scheme, delay could allow for the destruction of evidence or the completion of whatever plan was already in motion. The corridors of Kensington Palace suddenly felt different to William as he made his way back to his study. The familiar surroundings now seemed to harbor unknown threats and hidden betrayals. The secure environment he had always taken for granted had been compromised, and the personal nature of the betrayal made it feel like a violation of his home, as well as his professional responsibilities. William closed the door to his study and sat heavily in his chair, staring at the photos on his phone that documented what he had witnessed. The evidence was clear and damning, but the path forward was fraught with complications. Whatever action he took would have far-reaching consequences, not just for Camilla but for the entire royal household, and potentially for the monarchy itself. William spent the rest of that day in a state of controlled turmoil, maintaining his normal schedule while internally grappling with the enormity of what he had discovered. During his afternoon meetings with various charitable organizations, he found himself distracted, his mind constantly returning to the scene in the archives room. The professional smile he wore felt like a mask, concealing the storm of emotions and strategic calculations racing through his thoughts. That evening, after Kate and the children had retired for the night, William retreated to his private study and began the delicate process of investigation. He started by reviewing the palace's internal security protocols, examining visitor logs and access records for the past several months. What he discovered made his heart sink further. There were multiple instances where Camilla had accessed restricted areas at unusual times, often when most of the senior staff were away on official duties. William's training in security matters, gained through his military service and royal protection briefings, served him well as he began to piece together a pattern of behavior. Camilla's movements through the palace had become increasingly strategic and purposeful over the past 6 months, coinciding with several significant changes in royal financial oversight procedures that had been implemented following new government transparency requirements. Using his authorized access to palace communication systems, William discreetly reviewed email correspondence and internal memos. He was careful to stay within his legitimate purview while searching for any indication of Camilla's activities. What he found was troubling but subtle. There were numerous instances where she had requested information that seemed peripheral to her official duties, always framing her requests in terms of efficiency or coordination between different royal household departments. The pattern that emerged was sophisticated and carefully constructed. Camilla had been systematically gathering information about royal finances, the security protocols, and administrative procedures under the guise of improving household coordination. Her requests were always reasonable on the surface and came through proper channels, making them difficult to question without appearing obstructive or paranoid. William realized that Camilla's position within the royal household had provided her with unique access and credibility. As King Charles's wife, her interest in palace operations was natural and expected. Her requests for information were routinely approved because questioning them would have implied distrust of someone who was, technically, family and who held a significant position within the royal hierarchy. The more William investigated, the more impressed he became with the sophistication of the operation he had stumbled upon. This was not the work of an amateur or someone acting on impulse. The systematic nature of the information gathering, the careful timing of access to restricted areas, and the professional manner of the document exchange he had witnessed, all pointed to a well-planned and expertly executed scheme. William's thoughts turned to the mysterious stranger he had seen meeting with Camilla. The man's expensive clothing and confident demeanor suggested someone with significant resources and influence. His mention of a flight to Geneva was particularly concerning, as that city was known for its discretionary banking services and had historically been a hub for sensitive financial transactions that required privacy. Deciding he needed more information about Camilla's external contacts, William carefully accessed the palace's visitor management system. He discovered that while the stranger from the archives room had never been officially logged as a palace visitor, there had been several instances over the past few months where Camilla had hosted private meetings with individuals who were not entered into the standard visitor tracking system. These unlogged meetings were concerning but not necessarily illegal, as senior royal family members did have some discretion over private appointments. However, combined with the clandestine nature of the archives room meeting, they suggested a pattern of deliberate concealment that was deeply troubling. William spent hours that night reviewing financial records that were within his purview to examine. As heir to the throne, he had legitimate access to high-level summaries of royal household expenditures and could review general patterns in palace financial management. What he discovered made his stomach churn with a mixture of anger and fear. There were discrepancies in several accounts that managed discretionary royal funds, amounts that individually seemed minor, but collectively represented significant sums. The timing of these discrepancies aligned closely with Camilla's unusual access patterns and her meetings with unauthorized individuals. While William couldn't prove direct causation, the correlation was too strong to ignore. The financial irregularities were sophisticated and difficult to detect without specific knowledge of what to look for. Money wasn't simply missing. Instead, it appeared to be flowing through legitimate channels but ending up in accounts and purposes that didn't align with their intended use. It was the kind of financial manipulation that required inside knowledge and administrative access to execute successfully. William realized he was dealing with something far more serious than a simple breach of protocol or minor corruption. The systematic nature of the activities he was uncovering suggested a coordinated effort to compromise royal household security and potentially to siphon significant resources for unknown purposes. The implications for national security, royal family privacy, and public trust were staggering. As the night wore on, William found himself facing a terrible dilemma. The evidence he was gathering clearly indicated serious wrongdoing, but the perpetrator was his stepmother, a senior member of the royal family whose exposure would create an unprecedented scandal. Any action he took would inevitably become public knowledge, with devastating consequences for the monarchy's reputation and stability. William considered his options carefully. He could confront Camilla directly and demand an explanation, but this approach risked allowing her to destroy evidence or warn any co-conspirators. He could report his discoveries to the appropriate authorities immediately, but this would set in motion a chain of events that would be impossible to control or contain. Alternatively, he could continue his investigation quietly while gathering more conclusive evidence, but this delay might allow the operation to continue or even expand. The personal dimension of the situation made every option painful to contemplate. Despite what he had discovered, William couldn't help but remember the many family occasions where Camilla had been warm and supportive. She had been instrumental in helping his father find happiness after years of personal turmoil, and she had always treated William and his family with genuine affection and respect. The contrast between those memories and the calculated betrayal he had witnessed was emotionally devastating. William's military training had taught him to compartmentalize personal feelings when operational security was at stake. But this situation challenged those skills in ways he had never experienced. The enemy, in this case, was someone who shared his dinner table and played with his children. The professional detachment that had served him well in other contexts seemed inadequate to the complexity of emotions he was experiencing. As dawn approached, William made a preliminary decision about his next steps. He would continue his investigation for a limited period, gathering as much evidence as possible while maintaining normal operations. He would also begin quietly strengthening security protocols around the most sensitive palace operations, ostensibly as part of routine security updates, but actually to limit any ongoing damage from Camilla's activities. William also decided to involve his personal protection officer, Detective Inspector Sarah Thompson, in a limited capacity. Thompson had been with his security detail for over 5 years and had earned his complete trust through her discretion and professional competence. While he couldn't share all the details of what he had discovered, he could ask her to conduct enhanced monitoring of palace security without raising suspicions about the specific nature of his concerns. The decision to involve Thompson was risky but necessary. William recognized that he needed professional expertise in security matters to properly assess the situation and develop an appropriate response. Thompson's background in criminal investigation and her understanding of palace operations made her uniquely qualified to assist in the delicate task of gathering evidence while maintaining operational security. William spent the early morning hours preparing a secure communication protocol that would allow him to coordinate with Thompson while protecting the investigation from potential compromise. He established encrypted communication channels and developed a system of coded references that would allow them to discuss the situation without revealing sensitive details to anyone who might intercept their communications. As the rest of the palace began to stir with the start of a new day, William prepared to begin the most difficult investigation of his life. He would need to maintain his normal public schedule while secretly gathering evidence against a member of his own family. The weight of responsibility for protecting both the monarchy and the truth pressed heavily on his shoulders as he prepared to face whatever revelations the coming days might bring. The irony of the situation was not lost on William as he prepared for his morning briefings. He was about to attend meetings where palace security and operations would be discussed, possibly in the presence of the very person who was compromising those operations. The necessity of maintaining normal appearances while conducting a clandestine investigation would test his abilities as both a royal and as someone committed to upholding the integrity of the institution he would someday lead. William looked out at the palace gardens as the morning sun illuminated the carefully maintained grounds. The beauty and tranquility of the scene stood in stark contrast to the turmoil he was experiencing internally. Somewhere within these walls, a betrayal was ongoing that threatened everything his family had worked to build and protect. His determination to uncover the truth and protect the monarchy grew stronger as he prepared to face the challenges ahead. Detective Inspector Sarah Thompson received William's encrypted message during her early morning security briefing, and the unusual communication method immediately caught her attention. The coded language requesting a private consultation on enhanced protection protocols was professional enough to avoid suspicion, but urgent enough to convey the serious nature of whatever concern had prompted it. Within an hour, she had arranged to meet William in a secure conference room normally used for sensitive security discussions. When Thompson arrived at the designated location, she found William pacing near the window, his usual composed demeanor showing cracks of stress and determination. The prince she had protected for years was clearly grappling with something significant, and her professional instincts were immediately alert to the gravity of the situation. Without preamble, William activated the room's security protocols, ensuring their conversation would be protected from any potential surveillance. William began by outlining what he had observed, carefully presenting the facts, without speculation or emotional embellishment. Thompson listened intently as he described the archives room meeting, the systematic access to restricted areas, and the financial discrepancies he had uncovered. Her expression grew increasingly grave as the scope of the potential security breach became clear, and she began taking detailed notes in a coded shorthand that would be meaningless to anyone else. The detective inspector's first reaction was professional admiration for William's restraint in not confronting the situation immediately. Her experience in criminal investigation had taught her that premature action often destroyed the possibility of gathering comprehensive evidence, and she recognized that William's decision to investigate systematically was the correct approach despite the emotional difficulty it must have entailed. Thompson's analysis of the situation aligned closely with William's assessment. The pattern of behavior he described indicated sophisticated planning and inside knowledge of palace operations. More concerning was the apparent involvement of external parties, which suggested the potential compromise extended beyond the palace walls into unknown territory. The mention of Geneva flights and unregistered meetings painted a picture of international scope that raised serious national security implications. Working together, William and Thompson developed a comprehensive surveillance plan that would allow them to gather additional evidence while maintaining complete secrecy. Thompson would utilize her access to palace security systems to monitor movement patterns and communications, while William would continue his careful review of financial and administrative records. They established protocols for information sharing and emergency communication that would protect their investigation from discovery. Over the following weeks, their collaborative investigation revealed the true extent of the operation they were uncovering. Thompson's surveillance confirmed that Camilla's unusual activity patterns had been consistent for months, with regular meetings in various secure locations throughout the palace complex. These meetings often coincided with specific events in the royal calendar, suggesting that sensitive information was being shared at strategically chosen moments. The detective inspector's access to security camera footage provided crucial visual evidence of the ongoing conspiracy. She discovered recordings of several meetings similar to the one William had witnessed, each involving the same mysterious stranger and following similar patterns of document exchange. The sophistication of the operation became even more apparent as Thompson documented the careful timing and location choices that had allowed these meetings to occur without detection by routine security protocols. William's continued financial investigation revealed additional disturbing patterns. Using his legitimate access to high-level royal household accounts, he traced several suspicious transactions that appeared to be connected to a complex network of shell companies and international banking relationships. The amounts involved were staggering, representing funds that should have been dedicated to charitable purposes or official royal functions, but instead appeared to be flowing toward unknown destinations. The financial trail led William and Thompson into increasingly complex territory that required expertise beyond their current capabilities. They carefully researched the companies and financial instruments involved in the suspicious transactions, discovering connections to international consulting firms and investment vehicles that specialized in high-net-worth client services. The legitimate-seeming nature of these financial relationships made the actual criminal activity difficult to distinguish from normal business operations. As their investigation deepened, William and Thompson realized they were dealing with something far more sophisticated than simple embezzlement or information selling. The operation appeared to be part of a larger network that specialized in exploiting access to powerful institutions for multiple purposes simultaneously. Financial gain was clearly one objective, but the systematic gathering of information suggested additional motives that could include intelligence operations or strategic influence campaigns. The international dimension of the conspiracy became increasingly apparent as Thompson traced communication patterns and travel records associated with the mysterious stranger from the archives room. Her investigation revealed that this individual was connected to several high-profile consulting firms that specialized in what they euphemistically described as strategic advisory services for clients in sensitive positions. The deliberately vague nature of these business descriptions raised red flags about the true nature of the services being provided. William struggled with the emotional impact of each new revelation about Camilla's activities. Every piece of evidence made it clear that her betrayal was not a momentary lapse in judgment, but rather a calculated and ongoing violation of trust that had been occurring for months. The systematic nature of her deception was particularly painful, as it indicated that every family interaction during this period had been shadowed by her secret activities. The personal cost of maintaining the investigation while continuing normal family interactions became increasingly difficult for William to bear. During family dinners and public events, he found himself analyzing Camilla's behavior for signs of her double life while struggling to maintain the warm relationship they had always enjoyed. The cognitive dissonance between his knowledge of her betrayal and the necessity of normal family interactions was emotionally exhausting. Thompson's professional perspective provided William with crucial support during this period of strain. Her experience with undercover operations and complex investigations helped him understand that the emotional difficulty he was experiencing was normal, and that maintaining operational security sometimes required painful personal sacrifices. Her guidance helped William channel his emotional turmoil into focused determination to see the investigation through to completion. As evidence continued to accumulate, William and Thompson began developing scenarios for how to proceed once their investigation was complete. The challenge was immense. They needed to gather sufficient evidence to ensure successful prosecution while minimizing damage to the royal family and the monarchy as an institution. The timing and method of any eventual confrontation would be crucial to achieving both justice and institutional protection. The detective inspector's research into similar cases provided valuable insights into best practices for handling high-profile institutional betrayals. She studied how other organizations had managed comparable situations, looking for approaches that had successfully balanced accountability with damage control. Her analysis suggested that swift, decisive action based on overwhelming evidence would be more effective than gradual disclosure or attempted negotiation. William's access to legal resources within the royal household allowed him to begin preliminary consultations about the proper procedures for handling the situation they were uncovering. Working through carefully framed hypothetical scenarios, he was able to gather information about legal requirements and procedural safeguards without revealing the specific nature of his concerns. These consultations confirmed that the evidence they were gathering would likely support serious criminal charges if properly presented. The weight of responsibility for protecting both the monarchy and the principle of justice pressed heavily on William as the investigation progressed. He understood that his decisions in the coming days would have consequences that extended far beyond his personal family relationships. The integrity of the royal institution and public trust in the monarchy were at stake, making every choice a matter of national importance. As the investigation entered its final phases, William and Thompson prepared for the inevitable confrontation that would bring their secret work into the open. They had gathered substantial evidence of systematic betrayal and financial crimes, but the challenge of timing and managing the revelation remained daunting. The careful planning that had characterized their investigation would be crucial in determining how the ultimate resolution would unfold and what consequences would follow for all involved parties. The transformation in William's understanding of palace security and the vulnerability of royal operations was profound. The investigation had revealed systematic weaknesses that had been exploited with devastating effectiveness, and he realized that significant changes in protocols and oversight would be necessary regardless of how the immediate situation was resolved. The lessons learned from this betrayal would need to inform fundamental improvements in how the royal household protected itself from future threats. Thompson's professional assessment was that they had gathered sufficient evidence to proceed with formal action, but she also recognized the unique political and personal complexities that made this case unlike any other in her experience. The intersection of family relationships, institutional security, and potential criminal prosecution created challenges that required careful navigation to achieve optimal outcomes for all legitimate interests involved. As they prepared for the next phase of their response to the situation, both William and Thompson understood that they were approaching a point of no return. Once they moved beyond investigation into action, events would unfold rapidly, and with consequences that could not be undone. The careful preparation that had characterized their work to this point would be tested as they faced the challenge of bringing the truth to light while protecting the institution they had sworn to serve. The morning William chose for the confrontation dawned gray and overcast, matching the somber mood that had settled over him during his sleepless night of final preparations. He had spent hours reviewing the evidence one last time, ensuring that every detail was documented, and that he was prepared for any possible response Camilla might offer. Thompson had positioned herself strategically throughout the palace to monitor and document whatever events were about to unfold, her discreet presence providing William with professional backup while maintaining the appearance of normal security operations. William had carefully chosen the setting for the confrontation, the private sitting room adjacent to his father King Charles's office. The room's formal atmosphere and historical significance would reinforce the seriousness of what was about to transpire, while its privacy would allow for frank discussion without concern for eavesdropping or interruption. He had arranged for Camilla to meet him there under the pretext of discussing upcoming charitable initiatives, a cover story that would seem entirely normal to anyone observing their schedules. When Camilla arrived at the appointed time, her demeanor was relaxed and cheerful, showing no indication that she suspected the true nature of the meeting. She entered the room with her characteristic warmth, commenting on the unusually gray weather and inquiring about William's recent engagements with genuine-seeming interest. The contrast between her friendly manner and the knowledge of her betrayal that weighed heavily on William's mind was almost overwhelming, requiring all of his self-control to maintain a composed exterior. William began the conversation with seemingly routine matters, discussing upcoming family events and charitable commitments while carefully observing Camilla's responses and body language. His training in reading people, developed through years of public service and military experience, allowed him to notice subtle signs of tension beneath her surface composure. There was a slight tightness around her eyes and an almost imperceptible hesitation in her responses that suggested an underlying awareness that something was different about this meeting. After several minutes of preliminary conversation, William transitioned to the true purpose of their meeting with careful deliberation. He began by expressing his appreciation for Camilla's contributions to the royal household and her dedication to family responsibilities, establishing a tone of respect that would make the coming confrontation more effective. Then, with quiet intensity, he introduced the topic of palace security and the importance of maintaining confidentiality around sensitive royal operations. The change in Camilla's demeanor was immediate and telling. Her relaxed posture shifted to alertness, and William noticed her hands move unconsciously to her purse, a defensive gesture that suggested she was instinctively protecting something important. The warmth in her eyes was replaced by wariness as she seemed to recognize that this conversation was heading in an unexpected and potentially dangerous direction. Her responses became more measured and cautious, confirming William's assessment that she was indeed concealing something significant. William proceeded methodically through the evidence he had gathered, beginning with the most circumstantial observations and gradually building toward more definitive proof of wrongdoing. He described the unusual patterns of access to restricted areas, the unauthorized meetings with unknown individuals, and the suspicious financial transactions that had come to his attention. With each revelation, Camilla's composure slipped further, though she continued to maintain a facade of innocence and confusion. When William mentioned the specific details of the archives room meeting he had witnessed, including precise descriptions of the documents exchanged and the conversations he had overheard, Camilla's mask finally slipped completely. The color drained from her face, and she sat in stunned silence as she realized that her carefully constructed deception had been completely compromised. The shock of discovery was evident in every line of her body, and William could see her mind racing as she tried to process the implications of being caught. Camilla's first response was denial, delivered with a trembling voice that betrayed her fear despite her attempts to appear confident. She claimed that William had misunderstood what he had witnessed, insisting that her meetings were related to legitimate royal household business that required discretion for security reasons. Her explanations were elaborate but inconsistent, and William recognized the desperate improvisation of someone trying to construct a plausible alternative narrative under extreme pressure.
William countered each of Camilla's denials with specific evidence that contradicted her claims. He presented the photographic evidence he had gathered, the financial records that documented unauthorized transactions, and the security footage that Thompson had discreetly obtained showing the pattern of clandestine meetings.
The overwhelming weight of evidence made continued denial impossible, and Camilla gradually fell silent as she realized that her position was untenable. The moment when Camilla's resistance finally collapsed was both dramatic and heartbreaking. Years of deception seemed to lift from her shoulders as she abandoned her attempts at explanation and sat in defeated silence. The woman who had maintained such careful control over her double life for months was suddenly just a frightened individual, facing the consequences of choices that had spiraled beyond her ability to manage. William felt a complex mixture of satisfaction at uncovering the truth and genuine sadness at witnessing the destruction of someone he had cared about. In the quiet that followed her admission of defeat, Camilla began to speak about the circumstances that had led her to betray the royal family's trust. Her explanation revealed a web of financial pressures and personal vulnerabilities that had made her susceptible to recruitment by the sophisticated operation William had uncovered. She described how initial requests for seemingly innocent information had gradually escalated into systematic espionage and financial crimes that she had felt powerless to resist. The picture that emerged from Camilla's confession was of a carefully orchestrated campaign to compromise her loyalty through a combination of financial incentives and implicit threats. The mysterious stranger from the archives room was revealed to be a representative of an international consulting firm that specialized in gathering intelligence on powerful families and institutions for clients who were willing to pay substantial sums for such information. The operation was far more extensive than William had initially realized, involving multiple targets within the British establishment. William listened to Camilla's confession with a mixture of professional fascination and personal pain. The systematic nature of her recruitment and the sophisticated methods used to maintain her cooperation revealed the work of experts in human psychology and institutional manipulation. At the same time, the personal betrayal of trust and the damage to family relationships was devastating to contemplate. The woman who had shared family celebrations and intimate moments had been simultaneously working against everything the family represented. As Camilla's full confession unfolded, William realized that the situation was even more serious than he had initially understood. The information she had provided to her handlers included details about royal family security protocols, financial arrangements, and personal activities that could be used for purposes ranging from tabloid journalism to serious security threats. The potential for ongoing damage from the intelligence she had already provided was staggering and would require extensive damage control efforts. The question of what to do next hung heavily in the air as Camilla completed her confession. William was faced with choices that would determine not only her fate but also the future of the royal family's reputation and security. The evidence of criminal activity was clear and substantial, but the family relationships and institutional considerations complicated any simple application of justice. The decision about whether to pursue criminal prosecution or seek alternative resolution would have far-reaching consequences for everyone involved. William's training and sense of duty demanded that he prioritize the security of the royal institution and the rule of law over personal relationships. However, the human complexity of the situation and the potential for widespread damage from public exposure of the scandal required careful consideration of all available options. The conversation with Camilla had provided crucial information about the scope of the threat, but it had also raised difficult questions about how to balance competing obligations and interests.
Had an understanding of the prosecution that had targeted the royal household and an understanding the full scope of the operation in determining how the situation would be resolved.
Her willingness to help repair the damage she had caused would influence whatever consequences she would ultimately face. The weight of the moment was overwhelming for both William and Camilla as they sat in the formal sitting room, where so many important decisions had been made throughout royal history. The future of their family relationship, the security of the monarchy, and the principles of justice all hung in the balance as they prepared to move from private confrontation to whatever public resolution the situation would ultimately require. The careful investigation and planning that had brought them to this point would soon be tested in the complex challenges of implementation and consequence management. Thompson's discreet monitoring of the confrontation had provided additional security and documentation that would be crucial in whatever legal proceedings might follow. Her professional presence in the background had ensured that the confrontation was conducted properly and that all evidence was preserved for future use. The collaboration between William and Thompson had been essential in reaching this point, and their continued partnership would be crucial in managing whatever challenges lay ahead and resolving the situation completely and appropriately. The hours following Camilla's confession were a whirlwind of urgent activity as William implemented the carefully prepared protocols for managing the crisis that had finally come to light. Detective Inspector Thompson coordinated with specialized security teams to secure all areas of the palace that had been compromised, while William began the delicate process of briefing senior royal household staff about the situation without causing panic or triggering premature public disclosure. The gravity of the moment was reflected in the swift professional response that transformed the palace from its normal peaceful operations into a secure facility managing a significant security breach. William's first priority was ensuring that no additional damage could be done while the situation was being resolved. Working with Thompson and the head of palace security, he ordered immediate changes to all access protocols and communication systems that Camilla had been able to compromise during her months of clandestine activity. The efficiency of this response reflected the careful planning that had gone into preparing for this moment, but the scope of necessary changes also highlighted how extensively the royal household's security had been penetrated. The decision about whether to involve external law enforcement agencies was perhaps the most difficult choice William faced in the immediate aftermath of the confrontation. While the evidence of criminal activity was clear and substantial, the involvement of outside agencies would make it impossible to control the narrative or timing of public disclosure. After extensive consultation with legal advisors and security specialists, William made the decision to coordinate with appropriate authorities while maintaining as much control as possible over the investigation and prosecution process. King Charles was briefed about the situation within hours of Camilla's confession, and the conversation between father and son was one of the most difficult either had ever experienced. The king's shock at learning of his wife's betrayal was profound and deeply personal, but his sense of duty to the monarchy and the nation ultimately took precedence over his personal feelings. His decision to support William's handling of the situation, despite the personal cost, demonstrated the strength of character that had defined his approach to royal responsibilities throughout his life. The process of damage assessment revealed the true scope of the intelligence operation that had targeted the royal household through Camilla's recruitment. The information she had provided over months of systematic espionage included details about royal family security arrangements, financial structures, and personal activities that could be exploited in numerous ways by hostile actors.
The potential for ongoing security threats from this compromised information required immediate and extensive countermeasures that would reshape palace operations for years to come. Camilla's cooperation in the damage assessment process was extensive and appeared genuine, though William remained cautious about trusting someone who had demonstrated such sophisticated deception capabilities. Her detailed debriefing sessions with security specialists provided crucial information about her handler's methods and objectives, revealing an international operation that extended far beyond the British royal family to include similar efforts targeting other powerful institutions and individuals across Europe and beyond. The international dimensions of the conspiracy required coordination with intelligence services from multiple countries, transforming what had begun as a family betrayal into a matter of international security cooperation. The sophistication of the operation and its apparent connections to state-level actors raised questions about whether Camilla had been a willing participant in espionage, or simply an unwitting tool of forces she had not fully understood. These questions would prove crucial in determining the appropriate legal and personal consequences for her actions. William faced the enormous challenge of managing public disclosure of the scandal in a way that would minimize damage to the monarchy while ensuring accountability for the crimes that had been committed. Working with communications specialists and legal advisors, he developed a strategy that would reveal the essential facts while protecting sensitive details that could compromise ongoing security operations or unnecessarily damage innocent parties. The timing and method of public announcement would be crucial in determining how the scandal would be perceived and what long-term consequences it would have for the royal family. The personal dimension of the crisis continued to weigh heavily on William as he navigated the complex process of investigation and resolution. The woman who had betrayed his family's trust was also someone who had been part of intimate family moments and had shown genuine affection for his children. The cognitive dissonance between these personal memories and the evidence of systematic deception was emotionally devastating and would require time and probably professional support to process fully. The security reforms implemented in response to the breach were comprehensive and would fundamentally change how the royal household operated in the future. New protocols for information access, visitor management, and financial oversight were designed to prevent similar vulnerabilities while maintaining the operational efficiency necessary for royal family functions. The balance between security and accessibility would be permanently altered by the lessons learned from Camilla's betrayal. As legal proceedings against Camilla moved forward, William was forced to testify about what he had witnessed and the evidence he had gathered during his investigation. The courtroom appearances were emotionally difficult but professionally necessary, and William's composed testimony helped ensure that the full scope of the crimes would be properly documented and adjudicated. The legal process provided a framework for accountability that helped balance the personal and institutional dimensions of the betrayal. The mysterious stranger who had been Camilla's primary contact was eventually identified and apprehended through international cooperation between law enforcement agencies. His arrest and subsequent prosecution revealed additional details about the broader intelligence operation and led to the disruption of similar efforts targeting other high-profile individuals and institutions. The success of these international investigations validated William's decision to involve appropriate authorities despite the personal and institutional costs of public disclosure. The financial recovery efforts focused on tracing and recovering funds that had been diverted from royal accounts through Camilla's activities proved partially successful, though some resources had been moved through channels that made recovery impossible. The recovered funds were returned to their intended charitable and operational purposes, but the financial damage served as a permanent reminder of the costs of the security breach. New financial oversight procedures were implemented to prevent similar diversion of resources in the future. The impact on family relationships was perhaps the most lasting consequence of the entire ordeal. While William and his father were able to maintain their close bond through the crisis, the betrayal by Camilla created a fundamental shift in how the royal family approached trust and security within their personal relationships. The careful balance between family warmth and institutional security that had characterized royal household operations would be forever changed by the experience of systematic betrayal from within. Public reaction to the scandal, when it was finally disclosed through carefully managed announcements, was complex and multifaceted. While many citizens expressed shock and disappointment at the betrayal, there was also widespread respect for how William had handled the discovery and investigation of the crimes. His methodical approach and commitment to proper procedures enhanced his reputation as a future king, who could be trusted to protect institutional interests even when personal relationships were at stake. The long-term reforms implemented in response to the security breach extended beyond the royal household to influence security practices throughout the British government and other institutions that handled sensitive information. The case became a study in how sophisticated intelligence operations could exploit personal relationships and institutional trust, leading to widespread improvements in security awareness and protective protocols across multiple sectors. Thompson's role in the investigation and resolution of the crisis earned her widespread recognition within security and law enforcement communities, and her partnership with William became a model for how royal protection services could evolve to address modern threats. The collaborative approach they had developed proved effective not only in resolving the immediate crisis but also in establishing new standards for security cooperation within the royal household. As the immediate crisis subsided and normal palace operations gradually resumed, William reflected on the profound changes the experience had brought to his understanding of leadership and responsibility. The betrayal by someone he had trusted had been devastating, but the process of investigation and resolution had also demonstrated his capability to handle complex institutional challenges, while maintaining his commitment to justice and proper procedures. The experience had prepared him for the difficult decisions he would face as king in ways that no formal training could have provided. The resolution of the Camilla conspiracy marked a turning point in William's development as a future monarch and in the evolution of royal household security practices. While the personal costs had been enormous and the institutional damage significant, the successful handling of the crisis had ultimately strengthened both William's capabilities as a leader and the monarchy's resilience in the face of sophisticated threats. The lessons learned would influence royal operations for generations to come, ensuring that the betrayal had not been in vain if it led to stronger protections against future security breaches. Caught in the act, William orders the guard to block Camilla.